Well, all right, here we go. The big battle out of French and Indian War battles, and the one that I was most excited to own this game to play out, and that is the Battle of Quebec, 1759, the final nail in the coffin of the French in the French and Indian War. This is a big battle, a lot of units, as you can see. So before we get started and I jump in, you've seen enough of these videos to know kind of how the game is played. A couple of my thoughts. So first of all, the French set up first on the defense. They have got these 4 artillery units behind the bastion walls of Quebec with a range of 7. So if the British do advance close to the walls, they can come under some pretty heavy artillery fire, pretty dangerous artillery fire. And then we've got the French deployment here. So the French had to set up first, and given that I've already played several scenarios of this game, and seeing how you can really easily outnumber an enemy unit and how deadly the combat system is, I wanted to set up the French units in a perfect line so that when the British approached, we would get one-on-one combats across the line. I feel like that's the French's best way to probably win this scenario. They are vastly outclassed in the regulars department. They're mostly outclassed across the line, but the regulars 4s, there's a 7 under Montcalm, there's a 6 here, but primarily, I believe this is a regular as well, he's a 5. Primarily, they pale in comparison to the British regular units, but the advantage the French do have is this terrain. So we've got a couple of hilltops here, or I guess, like low rises. I have put Montcalm up here with the best unit, the SAR battalion, and the Languedoc, our friend Languedoc, he's got some artillery underneath him. I'm hoping that as the British probably want to approach along these roads and into this open plain, that they're going to come. The French artillery can cause some losses, and disorder the British line. I've got a sort of reserve force, not a reserve force, I guess a flanking force over here in the woods, both of whom are light infantry, pretty weak. It's Langlade, Native Americans, and then what's his name, Fontbrun over here with some light infantry. And then in these woods here, I've basically put all the French light infantry in the woods. And the reason for that is because they can disengage when it's before their combat phase, so they don't have to attack. And I want to make the British, if they're going to try and contest in the woods, fight the French's best light troops. So there's not a lot of room to maneuver in here. It's going to slow the British advance down, basically all these woods in general. But this road here, you can see I put the artillery in these woods here to potentially aim at this road as the British approach. That's my plan. We'll see how much that actually impacts the historical outcome, which was a French defeat, obviously. Both Montcalm and Wolfe lost this battle. We're going to be playing from the British perspective. So this way is north. That is east, where the city is. Here we've got the British. You can see their regulars a lot better. 6s. I believe Townsend is under... he's on top of some really good light infantry. We've got Wolfe here. He's got an 8 regular unit. And then some 5s. I mean, there are many more British units than French units. So much so that we kind of have a traffic jam here. So the British are going to have to come up these roads and then array in battle formation probably under French artillery fire, it looks like. And where the British press is going to be probably... that's going to be kind of the key. Obviously, the strongest French forces are here, and we don't want to be attacking up a hill. We have to worry about this flanking force if we go too hard. This seems to be the easier approach, but again, we've got the artillery that we've got to face every turn that we get closer. So it's going to be a real interesting battle. Once the line is engaged, I'm hoping that the British higher combat values can at least make a hole, or at least disorder the French in a way that causes them to be not so even across the front. But it's linear warfare, and so we're going to fight it as if it is linear warfare. You line up your troops, you attack in a line, everyone stays in their lane, and we're going to see how the combat system handles this. So let's get going. I believe in this scenario, the French first. If the French are first, they're just going to stay put. Yeah, French players first, so they're just going to stay where they are, and then the British are going to march on them. Just a quick snapshot here of the British advance as we finish turn 2. No combat yet. But the British starting in a neat line, but it doesn't stay that way given all the forested terrain here. The French, I think, are content to hold their ground. There's no use trying to engage where they don't have an advantage given the unit quality. So we're just going to keep marching until we get close enough. I think after the next turn, the French artillery is going to come into play, and we'll see how that first bombardment goes. So both sides have possible reinforcement entries in this battle, and the French just got theirs, their main group under Bougainville. He is going to appear down here in the Lake Charles area, and he actually comes with some light infantry. He comes with a pretty good regulars unit, but he also comes with a mounted cavalry unit down here, which is kind of interesting. So that's going to significantly change the way the battle goes. The French are going to have enough units for sort of a reserve line or possibly a flanking maneuver if the British aren't careful. French artillery failed to cause any sort of effect on the advancing British, and we're about to go to the British turn, and I think they're in a really good spot to try and overrun the French line, at least the initial line right now. So we'll set up Bougainville where he's going to move, and then here come the Redcoats. All right, the British are launching their first attack all across this line in the woods here. Mostly light infantry, although we do have some high-quality British regulars here attacking these cours de bois. And Townsend leading the charge for the British against this center weak point for the French. And then some other good on the flank, some really good British regulars attacking these cours de bois here, although that's, I think, a 1-to-1 attack. Monckton and Wolfe decided they weren't going to press forward against the hill. That means they are going to have to take one more turn of artillery fire under Languedoc. And the reason they did that is they were waiting for the rest of the units behind to catch up so that when they do launch the attack, they can get it across the line without having anyone be outnumbered. And we do have these light infantry here attacking the Native Americans on this side of the battlefield at pretty good odds. So we'll see what happens. This could be maybe a way for this flank to be unhinged and the British to maybe squeeze through around these hills. Bougainville is taking position as far as he could move there. We might send the cavalry over to this flank just to cover it. Let's roll some dice. All right, after the first British attack, they took a lot of disordered results, the British did. You can see some of the remnants of where those were. A couple of routes, actually, as well, as the French defense held firm. A lot of these light units are doubled in combat in Forest, I believe. And then the British were able to rally pretty successfully. The British regulars, some of them have a +3 rally on the backside of them, so they're not going to be turned aside. They're hell-bent on taking the city, I think. So, this is where we are. We didn't get any advances. We did disorder some light units over here. We disordered the Native Americans on the flank, but no real damage caused, just the initial skirmish. All right, firefights all across the line. We've had our first casualties. A couple of units took each other out in combat. British regular, the best French sort of light unit in these woods over here, that's opened a hole that the French are hopefully going to plug up with some more light units coming in, but the British are going to make their push now. Wolfe has joined the battle. He's next to Montcalm. We all know historically what happened there. They killed each other. But actually, Wolfe is attacking that unit there, and Montcalm is actually being fought by Monckton right here. British trying to break this flank. And this flank at the same time, if they can kind of envelop the French forces, it may be over pretty quickly. So let's resolve the combat. Well, French line starting to get a little thin. We've lost, we lost Sonnezuge, and we've lost Guienne, and we've lost these militia and these cours de bois. British really only suffered one casualty so far. Yeah, we lost these Native Americans. So the French morale is getting up there. They're at 16. Once they get to 40, they'll become demoralized. But the French artillery has just not been rolling well. It's been missing no effective fire, really. One effective fire, which was here that turn, but otherwise it's been really appalling how bad the French artillery has been, and the British have been rolling real well on their unit rallies. So they've been getting back to full strength at the end of their attacks, and the French have not been getting that good of a rally. So as you can see, it's starting to crumble in these woods here as the throngs of British press forward, and just not able to fill those gaps. And once you're locked into combat in this system, you're stuck there. And on your turn, you have to attack sometimes at bad odds. If you've taken a hit, like here next turn, I'm going to be attacking with 2. Because I can't get away, I'm disordered, so it gets really nasty really quickly. We are moving into turn 7 of 12. And it's going to be the French turn. It's going to be the British turn now. And we'll see what they can do. All right, well, battlefield's loosening up, but the British are now starting to take some casualties. They actually took quite a number of casualties that turn, and some really good units too. Yeah, they're look at all these British regulars who have gone down to French fire. A lot of exchanges that were not in the British's favor. But the biggest thing here, and that was completely unexpected, well, not unexpected, I guess, but this hill that the French have occupied here is the absolute strong point of the battle. And it's just so many combat factors here. The British, even with some combat shits, cannot take the hill. And unfortunately, Wolfe, who just led an assault on Montcalm, who was forced to lead an assault on Montcalm because of the zone of control rules in this game, had his unit eliminated, and then he is in Montcalm's zone of control. And Wolfe actually is dead or captured. So that is quite a blow to the British, but historical because Wolfe did take a bullet and die in this battle. So there you go. We're going to do the British rallies. We'll see if the French can somehow form a defense from their scattered forces. They're still holding. The French are actually still holding these two sort of victory hexes that cause demoralization if the British have them. The British thought they were going to take this one, but on a really like pretty even attack, the British rolled horribly and I think got an exchange. So the French are still hanging on, barely, but they're hanging on. I think it's going to come down to this center section here in these woods. I think now that there's no one in front of them, these redcoats are just going to, or these light infantry, these rangers are just going to march through there and start to encircle both halves of the French army. Well, here we are, still going at it. Turn 8. French had a pretty good counterattack turn there, eliminated some British units, but they took a bunch of casualties themselves, which they could ill afford to lose. French demoralization, actually both armies' demoralization is above the threshold, so both armies are demoralized. That has some effects, but most importantly, Moncton, so Montcalm made an attack that was actually really good odds and rolled terribly against this unit with this cavalry. Moncton's unit was, or Montcalm's unit was destroyed, and then on the British turn, Moncton has just walked over here and captured Montcalm because he's in an enemy zone of control. So that we're repeating history here. Montcalm and Wolfe both have gone down on the battlefield here in front of Quebec. It is the British turn. We're going to finish the movement up. We're going to do some attacks, and I suspect the game is coming to an end. I think it's going to be close. I don't think it's going to be as big a victory for the British as it was historically, but I think the British are going to eke this out. Well, both armies are completely exhausted, completely demoralized. This is what's left on the field. I mean, the casualty pile is a massive. You can see that why I'm a little skeptical of the casualties. Like, really, that many soldiers died? Or were eliminated, were not combat effective anymore. It seems high. But anyways, we're going into the final turn. No one can really move. Almost every unit that's left is disordered. These guys are not, but they don't want to attack each other because they're light infantry. Dumas is holding this crossroads here, but they're kind of staring off against each other because as soon as one unit moves towards the other, they're going to be in a zone of two enemies and have to attack both of them. So there's really no reason to press the attack there. They're just holding the flanks. The British did get one late reinforcement on turn 10 who's making his way up the road, but that's not going to do much. And the British are out of range of the artillery in the city of Quebec. So we're going to do this real quick, and then I'll calculate victory points and let you know what the outcome of this is. All right, well, the British on the final turn made one more attack to try and get the victory points under Dumas, but unfortunately they rolled terribly. They became disordered in the attack, and the French held on to that VP hex. So the ultimate point spread was a British marginal victory. So the French doing better here than they did historically. What would be the historical outcome here? The British pack up the army, retreat, and have to make another attack somewhere else. The French and Indian War continues perhaps into 1760 or 61, given what was happening in Europe at the time, the French managing to hold out, and the British sort of squandering their manpower in North America. Who knows? But that's the outcome we got here. And I guess I'll give you my final thoughts on this game and this system. What I like, what I am questionable about. Here's the casualty pile once again. You can see, both forces just utterly destroyed. Even if we don't believe they're all casualties, certainly a lot of units out of commission. And the city of Quebec not taken, the French not surrendering. Bougainville at the end here on this hilltop with some artillery managed to disorder Moncton and his artillery under there. Dumas still standing, facing off against Murray. So 2 leaders per side still in the fight, but of course Wolfe and Montcalm dead. So I really like the fact that this comes with 3 games, or 3 scenarios, 3 battles on one map sheet. I think that's cool. I think you probably won't play the Lake Ontario Fort Oswego scenario very often because it's pretty small and scripted. I think the Lake George scenario was a little bit more interesting. I think there's a lot of interesting maneuver choice in this one based on where the French want to try and attack and how the British set up their defense. So I really like that. Not as many units. And I think the system really shined here in the Battle of Quebec, which, again, there's not a lot of tactical games on. And when you got sort of the sense that the linear warfare was really important, and you could have swingy die rolls across a line that really tell a story where one part of the front might be advancing and one part of the front might be pushed back. What we saw here was the French, possibly getting ready to collapse on their left flank, and then suddenly a British attack just goes horribly wrong, and the French were able to secure it and eliminate the British resistance around these hills, which the British were never able to penetrate the French line here. Even though Montcalm was eliminated. So that was a really cool narrative. And then, the British, they had victory in their grasp if they just could have gotten through these woods and surrounded the French. But French light infantry, the Coureurs de Bois, their Canadian provincials, were just withdrawing when they had the chance, just moving out of attack range in the woods because they're light infantry, and managed to hold the British here so that they couldn't really exploit that advance. And the French right flank performed really well. The artillery there and Dumas and his units were stalwart. It was really hard for the British to make any quality attacks in this area, especially because they were facing down French artillery. And so you got like a nice story to the battle, and the linear combat feel came more to the forefront because you wanted to try and keep your units in a line so no one got outnumbered. No one was able to be exploited for being out of position. And so I think the Battle of Quebec here, was the best part of this game to me in terms of playing it. Still played really quickly. 12 turns flew by pretty fast, especially as all the units started getting whittled down. And, the first 2 or 3 turns is mostly the British just approaching the French position. I don't know how engaging it'll be, from a head-to-head perspective. But, there is some interesting, it's linear warfare, so there's not a lot of maneuver, not a lot of choice. But there is some interesting stuff, narrative that can happen. I think, good for a solo experience. I'm still skeptical of the modeling here of casualties or unit combatants. The combat table almost never gives retreats, and when it does, it's a rout. So it's usually the unit will retreat more than 1 hex. And I feel like there should be more push-pull. A lot of games that have push-pull CRTs get criticized for being too push-pull, and this is the rare instance where a game I think is too bloody and not enough push-pull. My understanding of 1700s warfare is that, you're using smoothbore muskets, and even at close range, they weren't very accurate. Like, what was the casualty rate of firefights between units, from hex to hex? I know it was more about disordering, but I don't know. If I were to make improvements here, so the reason the thing is so deadly is because most results on the combat table are a disordered result where you flip the counter over. But if you get disordered again while you're disordered, you are just eliminated. I personally think there should either be another dimension to unit quality, so maybe manpower and then also disorder status so that they're not tied together and, one affects the other. Or when you're already disordered and you become disordered again, maybe then you have to retreat 1 hex. And I'd be curious to see how the game plays if you made that change. Less bloody, certainly, and you'd probably have to adjust the demoralization balance for the sides for each scenario to what would... how would an army become demoralized? That would maybe throw off the balance. But I think it would feel better on the table that you wouldn't just have a line disintegrate, because I don't think to this degree, I don't think it actually happened in reality. Based on what I've read and how I understand these, this war in particular, you didn't have these massive wipeouts of units. Maybe on the continent, maybe in Europe during the 7 Years' War, but with the amount of troops we're talking here, it just feels too bloody, and it feels like there should be more retreats. And that morale and combat strength should be decoupled from one another. That said, I do think the maneuver rules about zones of control and how you have to attack in your zones of control, that does actually communicate the linear nature of the warfare, because once you're engaged with someone, you're basically attacking them, and you definitely don't want to get out of line, because then you can be outnumbered, or when you're forced to attack outnumbered can be really bad. So all in all, for a magazine game, I've definitely played worse magazine games, and this is a topic I really enjoy, and so the fact that I was able to play all of these and get a sense of what tactical French and Indian War might look like, even with my gripes, I think is great. I wish there were more tactical French and Indian War games, and the one thing that the designer Joe Miranda said in the rulebook is that these rules are for a system, so that we may see a Volume 2 with more battles from this era, which I would welcome. I would absolutely pick up a volume 2 of French and Indian War battles. What we really have here is two very early French and Indian War battles, even before it was sort of a hot war. It was 1755, 1756, and then obviously the main show, the Battle of Quebec. But I think there's some more room here where you could do another game of 3 potentially. They might be smaller, they might be in the size of this, but I would welcome it. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I have to say about it. Hopefully you enjoyed this look at French and Indian War battles from S&T Magazine 340. I've played through them all. I'm glad I got that under my belt, and I'm about to go on vacation, and when I get back, I'm going to play something else, and I don't know what it's going to be, but I have so many options.